week. Does anyone need a copy?
No
No problem. I had meant to bring a sheet for lesson 5, and I left that sitting at home today. So. Anyone else need lessons from last week?
So hurry up.
Okay, this is the one from,
Last week.
this is the one from
Oh,
last
I
week.
got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want something less to, you want something less to.
Ready.
Yeah.
Anyone else need a lesson sheet for lesson 4? In terms of prayer requests, Caitlin had surgery this past week, kind of unexpectedly, to have her gallbladder removed. Randy, I don't know if you have any updates. Things
All good on
things
that.
going good. Okay, things are going well. Also, Frank Phelps, a teacher at the middle school, has pancreatic cancer and is going to begin treatments this year soon. Note that's not in the bulletin. Please pray for Alan Bergeron, minister of the Church of Christ in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He was found unresponsive on his kitchen floor, flown Salt Lake City. He was diagnosed with,
Good luck pronouncing.
yeah, I don't know the name. It's a rare, life-threatening blood disorder that causes small clots. He got seizures and is on a ventilator. Yesterday, he did open his eyes on command, starting to respond more.
If he give you plasma, they said if they give you plasma, you have 10% survival rate.
Wow.
Pretty serious. He and I exchanged emails on Tuesday, so it happened Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning. I'm not sure.
Wow.
He thought he had COVID. He took a COVID test, it was positive. So he was staying home and his wife went on to Austin to see their son. And then when he didn't respond to any on Wednesday, that's when they sent the police over to check on him, but he had no COVID. All 3 hospitals tested him and he didn't have it, so.
Wow.
It was one of the home kids.
Certainly pray for him as well. Anything else that isn't in the bulletin or we should make mention of? All right. Seeing none, we will move into our lesson. We began last week discussing some of the qualifications of elders, hoping to wrap that up today. And with a mind of moving into maybe at the end of this week and certainly into next week, more discussion about, so we talked about kind of the history of elders as leaders. We talked about how do we get elders, kind of the appointment process. Now we're talking about the qualifications of elders. All of this should hopefully be leading into a discussion of what are elders expected to do. What role do they play? All of that kind of stuff. And I think really this discussion of qualifications really fits. It's kind of a lead-in, as most of the qualifications, I think, give us some idea of kind of what is to be expected of the elders. Most of them are not like, what do they look like? They are kind of either task-oriented or personality-oriented. So, but that's kind of where we're going. So we started talking last week. There's two primary passages that are used to commonly used to reference the sort of list of qualifications. First one is 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7, and then the other one is Titus 1, 6 through 9. So each passage has around 15 qualifications. There's a handful that are unique to each passage. There's a few listed only in Timothy and a few listed only in Titus. But other than that, they are very similar passages and have a lot of kind of overlapping qualities. So let's go ahead and start with rereading 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. I provided two translations on your sheet. I think it was a little bit helpful to kind of have the context of the two translations. Most of them are quite similar, but there's a few that are a little bit different. Would someone be willing to read that passage, 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7?
Here is a trustworthy saying: if anyone sets his heart on being an overseer, he desires a noble task. Now the overseer must be above reproach, the husband of but one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him with proper respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap.
Thank you. So we talked last week at the beginning that I think I had asked for kind of like a summary. If you had to kind of put this in your own terms, like what kind of a person should you be looking for? I think someone said they should be considered like a good man, which I think is definitely true. We also talked about the fact that most of these qualifications are no different than how all Christians should be striving to live. There's really only a handful that are, I guess, maybe only requirements specifically for this role of eldership. So really, in summary, like a lot of it just boils down to being an exemplary Christian of sorts, someone that you would look to and say, that person is walking the walk and able to lead sort of by example. So we had started to go down through the list kind of one by one, discussing the different qualifications that are pulled out from the list. I don't remember exactly how far we made it down. Last week I was thinking that class ran till 10:30, and it was we nearly got there. So I was a little bit frazzled at the end of class last week. So I know we made it down. I think down to like number 5 or so. So to kind of review some of the ones that we touched on, above reproach or blameless, faithful to wife, discussed. There's some differings of opinions on this, whether or not this would mean that in order to be qualified to be an elder, a man must currently have a wife. I know there's some Christians that believe that, for example, a otherwise qualified widower would not be qualified. I personally, and I think some others in the class, don't believe that that's necessarily what this verse, the purpose of this verse, but that it's more geared towards the man should one, not be an adulterer. They should be living their life in a way that is above reproach in terms of that topic. But also, it seems from that and the discussion about the role of a father in a family, it seems that it's more geared towards a man should be somewhat tested and proven in the arena of family life, including being a husband, having children, which we will discuss more about the children specifically today. Any other comments, questions on that topic?
I would agree with that. I don't think it's very relevant necessarily to our group as far as the widower thing, but it's kind of, to me, it just seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you can't become an elder at 65 because you've been widowed, what if you became an elder at 55 and your wife passes at 65 and now they remove your eldership? I mean,
Yeah.
It's kind of silly.
Yeah, I agree. I think it seems a little bit nitpicky, and yeah, I agree. It doesn't seem that something that would be totally beyond the man's control should contribute to his qualifications or not. But that idea certainly is out there.
Honestly, I guess just even growing up, I always just thought, at that time of the world, people had different 2 wives or 3 wives at the same time. Why can't it just have meant you can't have more than 1 wife right at this very second? Like,
Yeah.
that's what most of my life, I'm like, why don't we look at the time frame and say, there was, plural marriages then, I feel like, and
Yeah,
because people are coming from all kinds of different past religions, they might have come into this with more than 1 wife at the time, so why
yeah.
couldn't it just mean that?
Well, yeah, and that's good perspective. Yeah, I do think sometimes we maybe tend to overcomplicate things. So, yeah, it could simply mean that literally having 1 wife, and that's what it boils down to. Yeah, good point.
And Jesus does tell us that we marry if we are widows.
Right.
And the second wife, that's still one wife.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Yeah, someone had to say it. Good point. Any other comments, questions on that topic? Okay. We kind of went through, discussed a little bit the being temperate or self-controlled, and sort of different applications of that. Temperate, commonly thought of as someone who's not given to being overindulgent of substances, alcohol, those sorts of things. Self-controlled, sort of going along with that. But I would say in general, we have a picture of someone that is in control of their own faculties. They're not given to outbursts of emotion. They're not drawn away or distracted by temptations of this world, but they're moderate and of self-control.
When I think of temperate, I think of like weather, a temperate zone. The weather never gets too hot and never gets too cold. It's just kind of consistent and steady.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I'm thinking. Just in, what's that?
Yeah.
Just like here.
Oh, yeah.
Right, just like here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Any other comments on this?
I think temperate covers everything 4.15.
Yeah,
It does actually.
yeah. Said, thinks that temperate covers everything, below in the list, which I think is definitely, true. It encompasses a lot. Number 5 is one that is, that we see only in, 1 Timothy, but again, I think kind of is interconnected with most of these. Respectable, or New King James puts it, of good behavior. I think that is, in my mind, fairly self-explanatory and kind of what I was saying, excuse me, at the beginning of the discussion about someone who is able to lead by example, someone that you look to and they are obviously walking the walk, maybe not perfect, but someone who in general you would say is a respectable person. Any other thoughts or comments on respectable or of good behavior?
I don't necessarily see this being wrongness, I guess. I don't know. You can be on your best behavior sometimes, and it doesn't always make you respectable. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But to me, respectable is just someone who is all the time thought well of, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I see them a little bit different, but it's just semantics.
Yeah, I do see them somewhat distinct, but I also don't know if you could really have one without the other, like, but I kind of know what you mean, that like someone who's just dotting the I's, crossing the T's, maybe isn't always the same as someone who's respectable. But yeah, I guess I do think someone who's obviously not of good behavior wouldn't be respectable too. So, yeah. Hospitable. This is one that I hadn't really, I wouldn't have remembered just off the top of my head that this was in the list of qualifications. What do you guys think would be the role or the purpose for elders to be considered hospitable?
Maybe just that they're approachable, welcoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think when we hear the term hospitable, I think it conjures up, like, in my mind, a fairly specific thing of like being willing to have people to your house. But I think that is an example of being hospitable. But I certainly don't think it's the only way that people can be hospitable. I remember one time we were in a class about hospitality, and I can't think of the names right now. Just had them, and they left. There's a verse where in Acts there are believers that, or oh my goodness, shit, don't frazzle again. There's a discussion about believers that don't have the full truth, and this husband and wife that I know their names but can't think of, it says they took him aside and corrected him and provided the context of baptism and the role of Jesus. And this term took aside, we often kind of think of it in terms of like, maybe sternly grabbing someone and saying, like, come over here, let me correct you in this. But really, the context of the language is more, they came alongside instead of taking and pulling them away from the group, but they came along with them. It's sort of like, I always imagine it kind of like linking arms and moving forward, and corrected this error of doctrine in a loving, compassionate way. And, I think that's really one example of being hospitable, is the way that you interact with people sort of in everyday ways. It's not always that people need beat over the head with what's right or wrong, but that this image of coming alongside, helping people, I think is one kind of example of being hospitable, maybe outside of the common context of having guests in your home. Any other examples or thoughts about what does it mean, or what are examples of what being hospitable could look like? Carl?
I think something very important is if someone comes to you with issue, problem, and that person will be willing to listen to that person. Try to help them.
Yeah. For those online, Carl said if an issue is brought to someone, really that they would be willing to take the time and listen and hear. And I think it kind of goes along with that idea of coming alongside, and not just ignoring issues, not just kind of applying Band-Aid, like standard responses, but really listening, hearing, everything that kind of goes along with that.
And this is Sapphire.
Yes.
Next chapter.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I haven't looked into it in a while. I'm wondering, just the root word of hospitable, hospitality, if it involves providing needs, caring for, originally churches having hospitality rooms, that precursor to hospitals. If there's an idea of caring for needs involved in that word hospitable or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that would certainly fit with, other examples that we see in the early church of physically caring for one another's needs. We looked at the example a week or so ago of the Grecian widows and Hellenistic widows and their physical needs of food being met. Certainly the example early on of Christians meeting and sharing resources for a time to facilitate their gathering and their learning soon after Jesus departed. So yeah, I'm not very familiar with the root word either, but I certainly think that would be would fit with what we see expectations of Christians in general.
The Latin word is host, guest, or stranger. That means stranger or an enemy, actually. So the Latin word hospitalis means a guest chamber, guest lodging, an inn.
yeah, it's interesting, the kind of the idea of like, like the foreigner, like outsider that was kind of in that definition somewhat. Yeah, I guess I had generally been thinking about this in the context of being hospitable towards members in the flock, which obviously I think that is the case, but we'll see kind of at the end of the list, and maybe more so in Titus, kind of the expectation for them to be able to interact in an effective way with those that are outside of the faith as well. So good, yeah. Again, to me, this was just kind of an interesting one. I think it's something that, again, I think can take many forms, but certainly something gives kind of an image of warmth, being willing to interact with the flock, care for the flock, kind of in a personal way, not just a top-down sort of leadership approach.
Well, I was gonna say, when you're an elder, your porch light's never really off. I mean, like, you have to be willing to, at 3 a.m., be like, I'll be right there. You have to be okay with your life kind of not being your own anymore, and you just have to kind of take people in or go to people's houses or be wherever you need to be, so I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably talk more about this next week, but like, just what does it mean to be shepherd? And we see the parable of leaving the flock, leaving the 99 to follow the one. That's not something that's just like, well, if that one wanders away on Sunday morning, we'll go after it. I do think it's somewhat of a lifestyle commitment. Good. Any other comments on being hospitable?
We talked about a shepherd, and a shepherd also takes care of all the needs of the whole flock too, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's their main job.
Yeah, they care for the flock. 7 is able to teach. We see in Titus that those who labor in teaching and preaching are worthy of double honor. And so it's interesting. We see here, it's not necessarily that they teach all the time, but that they have the ability to teach. So kind of fitting in with what I was just saying with the hospitable conversation, I think when we hear the term able to teach in context of Bible class, I think it's easy to kind of list off a few ways that men could be able to teach, willing to lead a Bible study, willing to preach a sermon, which I think would certainly be desirable traits for an elder. I do think that there's other ways that men can teach that maybe isn't that if people struggle with public presentation, I think that there's other ways that they can teach. I think that in fitting with this, it could be more one-on-one scenarios, small groups, sort of a mentorship type of situation. But I do think in fitting with the passage in Titus, where those who labor in teaching and preaching are worthy of double honor, I think it certainly is something that should be desired or encouraged for elders to be able and willing to preach in a public format as well. Although I would just say it's maybe not a hard qualification that if a man is not able or willing to get up and deliver a sermon, I personally don't know that that would disqualify them from the role of eldership. But that's just kind of the way that I view that. Be certainly interested in hearing any thoughts or comments on that part of able to teach.
I think it goes back to, man, one wife and have a family, and can't take care of his family. You're teaching your family constantly. You're teaching them and bringing them up, but you're not teaching in front of the school. So I think it's the same thing you're saying. If you're able to teach your kids how to do right, then you're teaching them. That's just fine.
Yeah, I think that's very true. To be a successful father, husband requires the ability to teach in that role, certainly.
Go along with what she said, as teachers by example.
Teaching by example.
Teach your kids the way you treat your wife, the way you treat other people. You should pass on to them, they should pass it on to their children, so by example.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes is one of the most effective forms of teaching, is by good example.
Maybe I'm in the minority, but there are just some people who can't teach. And why should we all suffer because we have to prove that they can? You know what I mean? I'm saying some people are not cut out to stand up and teach a class because they can't do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know that means that man can't sit down with me one-on-one and teach me how to find the Lord. I mean, I think maybe he could, but just to present and prepare a lesson, some people just aren't cut out for that. So I just feel like if you're not even conveying anything to the masses because you can't prepare a lesson, what is the point? I mean, I just to prove that you can, that's silly to me. So sometimes I think it's just you're able to teach because you have the knowledge of the subject material, not you're able to get up and present this fantastic, beautiful lesson. So I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority there, but I just think to make a man do it just to say he can, that doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I've actually, been a part of congregations that sort of in an eldership, in a time where they were looking to appoint elders, they requested that men who were considered prepare a sermon. And honestly, in that case, it went well. All of the men actually did, I think, provide pretty good lessons. But I agree. I don't think really that's the point of what this is discussing. I mean, we could discuss. I think it is good. Again, it says it's an honorable thing if people are able to do that. So I think it is good to encourage men and help train men and teach men and give them opportunities to do that. But I think that is different than saying, all right, if you're going to be an elder, you've got to get up there and plan out a sermon, and it better be good. I don't think that's personally that's what this is saying here.
I agree with all that. And I also, if you go to the other end, I think though, if there's a man that might otherwise be qualified, that's not even willing to try, and I have seen men like that, they're not even willing to try to stand up in front of the group that they love and love them, then that's at least a red flag for me also. I'm not saying I want that person to week in and week out, or even for a quarter, to be a teacher or preacher. But again, if they're not even willing to get, I think of Fred Anderson for years, everybody here knows him. He did not feel comfortable teaching, but there was a couple of times that he did, out of necessity. He was willing.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't feel like he was good at it, and so therefore didn't on a regular basis. But at least he was willing to do it when it was necessary. And I think that that might be on the other end of the spectrum,
Mhm.
kind of at least something that might bring up a red flag too.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. And I would say, again, a lot of these are kind of, they're somewhat soft terms. They're a little bit hard to pin down. But I do think this able to teach is something that, again, can take many forms. I think there are times that there have been men that might otherwise be qualified, but even, you know, in any way, maybe don't fit this this qualification of people thinking of them as being someone that they would go to be taught, to be led, to be instructed. Again, in my mind, whether that's in a public formal setting, such as class or sermon, or in kind of that more personal way. Good comments. Anything else on this ability to teach? We are. Class is going quick again today. Good. Not given to drunkenness. I'll leave that one there. I think we kind of covered that with discussion of temperate and self-control. I would just say that I think in keeping with being a Christian, you know, if someone has a former life and they repent and change, I don't know that someone who previously was an alcoholic becomes a Christian and gives up that life. I don't think that would disqualify them from being an elder. I think in general, being a Christian, we're not tied to our former life. We're made new. We die to our sins and we rise new. So I think this is someone that, while they're a Christian currently, should not be given to drunkenness. Not violent. There's, I think some passages say not slow to strike. I think obviously that would include physical violence. Someone should not be a brawler or a street fighter. But I think too, you know, the way they conduct themselves when put in uncomfortable situations, when pushed with differences of opinions, not being given to outbursts of anger. Again, all of this kind of fitting under being temperate or self-control. Not being violent. Again, right below that, we see being gentle. So, not only can you not be violent, but you should be the opposite of that. Be gentle. And then, kind of the trifecta is not being quarrelsome. So I think those three all fit together. I think to paint a picture about the character and how they should interact with challenges, with frustrating members of the flock, in general, to be loving, to be gentle, to be kind. Any thoughts, comments on any of those three?
That's crazy and terrible place. Somebody that was an alcoholic in the past. It's a bad thing to do, it's a bad place to be, but if you've overcome it and you're living with God, and if there is someone that's going through that problem, sometimes it can be a good thing because you can say, I've been there, I've dealt with it, God keeps me now, you can do this, and sometimes it makes that person feel a little more comfortable with that alcohol.
Yeah, I think that's true. Someone that, an elder that was an alcoholic or really, I think we could fill in a lot of those blanks previously, I think can certainly be a good resource to those that are dealing with similar challenges in the flock. Good. Any other comments what we've covered so far?
If you look at history and see all the wars and the killings and the pillagings and whatever, there's not that many men who fought, have 9, 10, 11 down, or we'd be a much gentler world.
Yeah.
I just feel like those are things that some men thrive in.
Yeah.
Just, nations thrive in that sometimes.
Yeah. My mind just went to Peter when he said that, and maybe others of the apostles that would have been of a violent persuasion originally, looking for to turn over the physical kingdom that was oppressing them at the time. Number 12, not a lover of money. This could be almost a whole class in and of itself about the expectation for Christians to have in relation to the earthly blessings, physical wealth. I would just point out that this does not say that it's not someone who has money or who has been blessed. The New King James puts this as not covetous and not greedy, which I think is maybe a more descriptive term about the nature that is at question here. So if someone who is otherwise qualified happens to be very well off, that does not in and of itself disqualify them. But certainly someone who is overly concerned with money, overly concerned, I think really this is applying to other worldly things as well, status, things of that nature. That should not be the focus or the intent of elders. We see in Titus that elders at least have the option of being supported by the congregation monetarily through what they do. And that should not be the reason that a man desires to become an elder. Even I think the status or the position that comes with eldership, although it should be something that a man desires to do, it should not be because it will promote them in the eyes of their brothers and sisters, but that that is something that they should approach with humility. Any other thoughts, questions, comments on not a lover of money? We are over time. All right. Sorry, my time management has not been good. I do, at the beginning of next week, I do want to spend a little bit of time on the question of believing in faithful children, as that's something that we see commonly having questions. Unfortunately, often can be a disqualification for many men. So I want to give a little bit of time to that next week. And I'll look through the list and see if there's any others that that warrant a little bit of extra discussion. Other than that, we will begin looking at what do elders do, what are they expected to provide to the congregation. Any other questions, comments before we wrap up today? All right. Thank you. Sorry to go in a couple minutes over.